So Tulsi Gabbard went on to absolutely destroy Tim Ryan. I felt like it was so great to watch. It was so obvious that she was not only directing this at Tim Ryan, but at every single establishment Democrat, and yes, even the neocons that are currently in power.
Today, the Taliban claimed responsibility for killing 2 American service members in Afghanistan. Leaders as disparate as President Obama and President Trump have both said that they want to end U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, but it isn't over for America. Why isn't it over? Why can't presidents of very different parties and very different temperaments get us out of there? And how could you?
I have an answer. Look, I'm not sure, but maybe can it be due to the military-industrial complex serving the war machine, oil, natural resources, minerals, and the list really goes on.
Is that you have to stay engaged in these situations. Nobody likes it. It's long. It's tedious. But right now we have, so I would say we must be engaged in this. We must have our State Department engaged. We must have our military engaged to the extent they need to be. But the reality of it is this president doesn't even have people appointed in the State Department to deal with these things, whether we're talking about Central America, whether we're talking about Iran, whether we're talking about Afghanistan. We've got to be completely engaged. And here's why. Because these flare-ups distract us from the real problems in the country. If getting drones shot down for $130 million because the president is distracted, that's $130 million that we could be spending in places like Youngstown, Ohio, or Flint, Michigan, or rebuilding.
Why not spend that money building Michigan? Why not spend that money by providing people health care, housing, I don't know, maybe taking care of the vets? Just a suggestion, I don't really know. And this is where Tulsi Gabbard eats him alive, literally eats him alive.
The parents of those 2 soldiers who were just killed in Afghanistan, well, we just have to be engaged. As a soldier, I will tell you that answer is unacceptable. We have to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. We are in a place in Afghanistan where we have lost so many lives. We've spent so much money, money that's coming out of every one of our pockets, money that should be going into communities here at home, meeting the needs of the people here at home. We are no better off in Afghanistan today than we were when this war began. This is why it's so important to have a president and commander-in-chief who knows the cost of war and who's ready to do the job on day one. I am ready to do that job when I walk into the Oval Office. Thank you very much.
This is a point that I love and I wish more people would actually make. The thing is, you've already been engaged, which means your technique has been proven not to work. The situation currently is absolutely worse than it was when, the invasion first happened.
I would just say I don't want to be engaged. I wish we were spending all this money in places that I've represented that have been completely forgotten and we were rebuilding.
You don't want to be engaged. Great. Then don't be engaged.
If the United States isn't engaged, the Taliban will grow and they will have bigger, bolder terrorist acts. We have got to have some present there.
Did you just say that if the United States is not engaged, then the Taliban will grow? Yeah, I mean, if Iran is not engaged here in the United States, then the KKK will grow. I mean, isn't that kind of the same? Sounds the same to me, and I think it's quite crazy either way. And by the way, you're acting like you haven't been engaged. But you have been engaged, and your technique has not worked. The Taliban have already grown. You said bigger, bolder terrorist acts. Look, I know that perhaps not many people are educated about this, but the Taliban is a guerrilla army, and currently I'm not precisely sure about the number, but from what I've heard, anything from 40 to 60% they have control over. So since the invasion, they've actually gained more popularity and more power. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of Afghanis started to support them. They go, you know what, I'd rather the Taliban over a foreign military that is permanently occupying my country in the name of terrorism and human rights. When the kind of know the reason. So unfortunately, this engagement you're speaking about actually benefited the Taliban, because they posed as these freedom fighters that were going to kick off the Americans off of their land.
There long before we came in. They'll be there long before we leave.
Well,
we cannot keep U.S. troops deployed to Afghanistan thinking that we're going to somehow squash this Taliban that has been there, that every other country that's tried has failed.
I didn't say squash them.
I mean, you did kind of say squash, like in other words, we've got to stay there to destroy them, except you have not destroyed them, and you're just not going to be able to destroy them. Actually, when you were there, they gained more popularity and more power.
When we weren't in there, they started flying planes into our buildings. So I'm just saying right now,
the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did.
Well, I understand.
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
I understand.
That's why I and so many other people joined the military, to go after Al-Qaeda, not the Taliban.
The Taliban was protecting those people who were plotting against us.
Exactly. Finally, someone said it. Damn, I wish you could also debate Elizabeth Warren on this, because we all know that Elizabeth Warren, well, not everyone knows, unfortunately, but Elizabeth Warren is no progressive on foreign policy. Not only is she establishment, but she voted with Donald Trump on his insane military increase.
All I'm saying is, if we want to go into elections and we want to say that we got to withdraw from the world, that's what President Trump is saying. We can't. I would love for us to.
Yes, Donald Trump said that, and that was a positive at the time. Tulsi Gabbard is actually going to do what Donald Trump promised to do. He didn't actually follow through with anything, and his anti-war rhetoric resonated with people in the center, the right, and the left. It wasn't the Taliban, and it wasn't Iran. Yes, it was Al-Qaeda, but where did they mostly come from? Saudi Arabia. And who arms, supports, and funds them? I think we all know the answer to that. Donald Trump pretended to be against Saudi Arabia, and he also pretended to be against extremism and terrorism. I mean, isn't that why he wanted a bigoted travel ban? I mean, he doesn't really seem to be against terrorism and extremism. He's just more of a bigot that wants to go after regular people, including American citizens that just happen to look different than him.
Tim Ryan, after the debate, went on to basically accused Tulsi Gabbard of dining with a man that gassed children. Well, I'd firstly say that there wasn't enough evidence to actually suggest that he was the one responsible for the recent gas attacks. Secondly, at the very least, she's not a coward that sits in her castle and wants to send others to fight in wars. She actually had the courage to go to Syria and speak to the Syrian people. There are lots of videos of her speaking to Syrian women, and let me tell you something. They didn't view her in this type of way.